We're a Kiwi couple living in Australia who brought a 57-foot steel trawler after she sunk in a flood and was pulled from the sea. We're now bringing her back to life. We're on to the finishing jobs after working on her for the last 6 years to refit and get her ready for launch as soon as possible. Brupeg is rebuilt by us with volunteers funded by Patreons and viewers, and we spend every cent we have to make sure that she's ready. She's fueled by veggie oil, diesel, solar and wind power to do research, projects and expeditions to remote places like Antarctica and the Northwest Passage. She'll be crewed by supporters from around the world. Welcome aboard.
Comes like the rays of the sun, she shines.
G'day, how you going? We're getting pretty close to putting Brupeg in the water at these wharfs behind me here. That's where the travel lift rolls out to drop the boat into the drink. There's a couple of things we have to get sorted on the boat before we do that. The engine is the heart and soul of Brupeg, so it's a major component for us to get right. On East Coast trawlers like Brupeg, it's pretty common to run one of two engines. Most of these boats either run a Caterpillar 3406, and there's a few variations of that motor, or they could run a Cummins 855. Again, a few variations of that motor, but most boats run one of those two engines. There's a few other variations. Some have got Mercedes, some have got Detroits, that sort of thing, but most of them run those two engines. We tried to find a 3406 when we were looking at engines for Brupeg, and we couldn't find one that was a decent price or a decent sort of condition. We did, however, find an 855 that came out of a truck. It was a risk though, because it was a very cheap engine. We'd had very little money. We had to basically make some pretty educated guesses as to what was a good value, purchase. This engine we paid $5,000 for, which is pretty cheap for one of these engines. It was a complete engine. I was told that it was a runner. However, it has a sordid history. It's been in a fire. So, the engine that we started with on Brupeg was a truck engine that had been in a truck that had caught fire. So we didn't know a lot more than that. We only had that information and 4 photos to go off. The old bloke I bought it off didn't know how to do videos on his phone and that sort of thing. He just said, you basically take it or leave it, take my word for it, it's a runner, and that's all you got, sort of thing. So we did a bit of an educated guess, and we decided to go for it. Now there's a couple of differences between a truck engine and a marine engine. You've got to change things like fuel pumps, you've got to get rid of the exhaust brakes, and a few other minor bits and bobs on the engine itself. So that was one of the conversions that I wanted Adrian to focus on when he was up here, so that we can make sure that that motor is essentially as good as running a marine 855 in this boat. So I used to rebuild engines like this for a job when I was sort of 18 or 20. And one of the things I was thinking is, with this engine, I don't have a huge amount to go off. The information was pretty scarce. I thought it was worth it for a couple of reasons. Let me show you why. I knew the engine had been in a fire, but I also thought, based on the photos that I could see, I didn't think it got that hot, because this pipe here, this one here, this wee one around the back here, they're all original. So I was sort of thinking, okay, if the rubber hasn't melted, I don't necessarily think the engine has got so hot that it would have caused dramatic damage. There's not even any singeing on these bits of rubber. The top radiator hose was still okay. So I thought, yeah, it might well have been in a fire, but I don't think it's been so dramatic that it would have caused any issues. The flip side being, it was a complete engine. So given that I used to recondition this type of diesel engines like this for a living, I thought, okay, well, I can probably buy the parts that I need and then rebuild this engine. We decided to give it a go. We chucked it in the boat, and then in this episode here, you can see we managed to get it started as is. I hadn't opened the engine up at this stage, so I still knew nothing about it. I just basically wired it up to see if we could get it running, and it ran like an absolute sweetheart. So this engine for us was a huge risk, and something that we're really proud of. She's an absolute sweetheart, and something that we're really looking forward to maintaining over the years. Have you finished yet?
Yeah,
it's not even off.
Nah,
have you just been rubbing it?
I've just been rubbing it. Oh, look at that air conditioning.
The first job I wanted done was changing the truck fuel pump over to the marine fuel pump.
So it's as simple as that.
Thanks, Adrian, for putting us onto Carl, the Cummins specialist in Brisbane. Dame spent some time with him and picked up this gear from him. It was awesome. Thanks.
Valve bridges, oil plugs, check valve for the fuel pump gasket's already on there, ready to go. Like that. Pretty good little fuel system, the Cummins, with the pressure time pump. Very simple, pretty reliable, doesn't seem to give a lot of trouble. As much as I'm a Detroit person, Respect for the Cummins, they're still a good engine. They do what they're set out to do. Fuel pump's on.
Yep. What's the difference between a truck fuel pump and a marine or generator fuel pump?
So if I move this lever to 1,000 revs,
Yeah.
this fuel pump will will do everything that it's possible to stay at 1,000 revs.
All right.
But if I move on this truck here, it could die back. It will easily die back to 1,000. Go say from 1,000 back to 800 the moment you point it at a hill.
Yep.
So then you have to put your foot down then to give it more go.
Sometimes they're caught nodding off on the job. It's hard to know, but if you look very, very carefully. Hello. So while the sandblasting's going on, I can't actually use the air for plasma cutting, so Adrian and I are going to get stuck into the Cummins and rip off the exhaust brakes and yeah, hopefully quieten this thing down when we have to come a little bit too hot into marinas. Do you want a screwdriver?
Oh, just want to push it.
Can you were doing that?
Oh, well, there you go.
Why don't we take the lid off?
Oi, oi, oi.
Holy shite. What's going on there? Water?
Water.
Condensation? Rusty goo.
Rusty.
Rusty.
Probably from being in the fire.
Right, moment of truth. What's it like under the other lids? Similar.
See, I don't even know the history of the engine. That's the hard part.
No, we know no history of the engine.
Why they don't know why the truck was the truck working when it caught fire, obviously, or was it in a bushfire?
I don't know if it was working at the start of the fire. It wasn't working at the end of the fire. I'm assuming contestant number 3 here is going to be the same.
I reckon. Maybe. Yeah.
So that was pretty well sealed. So the water's obviously come from inside the motor.
So now you need to fill the motor with water and pressure test it and take the sump plug out.
So could it be liners then, most likely?
Could be.
Let's get the jakes off regardless, because we've got to do that no matter
Yeah, that's
what.
right, yeah. They can come off, it doesn't matter, yeah.
Yeah, and then let's get the water in.
Like Cummins, Jacobs, who make the engine brakes,
Yep.
certainly nailed it, you know, when they did it for the bigger diesel engines.
And what do they do in a wholly British brand like Cummins?
They sound really good, but you know what? Just not
Sorry.
the same as a Detroit.
Sorry,
Just not.
sorry, can you just say that last bit again? It sounds really good.
Sounds really good. but
And cut, and we're done, cut.
And as you see, a Cummins bloke needs a fucking big bar to undo the bolts.
But this is the difference though, Cummins blokes come with big bars.
What about these bolts here?
What about those bolts there?
I don't feel that you undid those bolts there.
I haven't finished the job, Adrian. You come in halfway through the job and start criticising.
I love the way he gives you a lip while you're holding an iron bar.
It's been 20 years since I pulled a motor apart.
Knuckles come round and grab the hammer.
Show why it's important to qualify.
This is why timber tools. Yeah, this
Tools are good.
Yeah, and Adrian's doing it, so no one's going to be able to give us shit about it.
Now, don't ever give the claw hammer stick in a mechanical context.
Yeah.
That's it.
There we go. There you go. You can see you got the head stud bolt there
Right.
to torque the head down, and then you've got this long
Sitting
bit
on
to
top.
bolt the
So
jakes
it's got a
on.
recess in here, hasn't it?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
does.
and you've got to have a disgustingly purpose socket for this job.
Oh, right.
So I had to.
Do you want me to get it? I got it over here.
Socket for here, or
Have you? Really? Go for it. That's how you do it. I want to see you do it.
we'll be back with a carpet here in 2 days.
See, Jack,
And 6 rounded nuts. Someone put a bloody great exhaust pipe in the way.
That's a good
That
one.
didn't feel very nice.
Bing.
push it down over the top.
Yeah.
Oh, the bolt's all rusty. Yeah, just
Yeah.
make sure you're all the way down.
You think you see better?
Is that down? Doesn't feel very good.
I think that nut's a bit fucked.
Yeah, I think we're rounding it. Although it's the easiest one to get to. Right, let's wait till we got that one cracked a bit more. Hey!
Your hands.
I could probably crack it off with this now.
Someone cracked off.
No, I don't trust that.
That's probably pretty worn.
Feeling a bit doughy. I think we're all good. Yeah.
necessarily. You've got rocket cover, Jacobs, rocket gear, cylinder head.
Yeah. So that's the injector in the middle. This is a top stop injector. So early injectors were non-top stop. They have, you can probably see, look, if you have a look, it's Allen socketed. There's a plug in the top, stops the plunger, which pushes the fuel out the injector tip from popping out the top. And this is just a later series of injectors.
Alright, well let's press on and get the others off.
Yep.
That one's at Ooga Dooga torque. Alright, so that's ready to go. So where's that claw hammer?
Bunker!
There we go. Okay, there we go. Yep, clear.
Sweet.
Here we're just taking the last of the rocker boxes off the Cummins. Rocker boxes are the piece of equipment that essentially houses the rocker arms. The rocker arms link the push rods to the valves and control how far the valve opens for each cylinder. It doesn't look too bad down here.
No, so maybe it was just from where it got hot and it did get...
Because it was all up the top end of the motor. Let's show YouTube. Right, so we've still got a wee bit of rust showing up in this cylinder. This one's not too bad, this one's got rust in it. These ones are not too bad, there's a wee bit of crap in here. Nothing that's massively dramatic, and then this one's not too bad as well. If you're not familiar with a large commercial diesel, they often split the cylinder heads when you've got multiple cylinders in an engine like this. In this case 6 cylinders, and they run pairs for the cylinder head, so you've got 2 pistons per cylinder head. And that's what you can see here, where you've got cylinder number 1 and cylinder number 2. So I guess it's the back end and it's the top end of the motor that's sort of where it is.
So we're going to have a look-see.
Maybe we should pull that injector because it looks a bit scabby, doesn't it?
It does, I'm worried about that injector.
Yeah. The rockers are changing as well, I think.
Yeah, no, just the valve bridges. Just the one valve bridge where the Jacobs was.
Oh, right, okay. All right.
That's it. Yep. It's the only one that changes.
This is a Jacobs brake bridge, and this is just a standard bridge.
Standard valve bridge.
Yep.
And everything else.
So this
could be just condensation from where the motor's been in the fire, and when it got hosed down and cooled down.
Yeah, this is a unit injector where they're basically integral and internal to the motor, so you can't really bleed them. They're more of a commercial thing. You don't see these on recreational diesels or like car motors or anything like that.
It's a big diesel thing.
It's a big diesel thing, yeah. And this is partly why it's okay to have a single main engine, is because everything inside the engine is built just way more sturdier and designed for continuous operation. Do you want the good news or the bad news?
Both?
Well, the good news is we have a beautiful engine, like beautiful.
You got the confirmation from
Well,
the guy?
I've recorded enough sound bites that we could edit it up heavily, but I think we could probably work with it. We also found rust inside the engine. Yeah, but
Oh, that's really not great.
that's not what I was expecting to see. However, we don't think it's as bad as it first looked. So what we found was we think it's condensation from the fire. We think because there's 3 heads, 6 cylinder, 2 cylinders per head. The front one is okay. The middle one is medium bad, and the back one is quite bad. But the filler and everything is at the back, where it would have got really hot tin lids. They would have got stinking hot, and then when they sprayed it with a fire engine and cooled the whole thing down, it would have got cold really fast and condensated, and we think that it's most of it atmosphere that's been sucked in is coming through the back, and that's the rusty one. And when we pulled all the jake brakes off and stripped it all down, most of the rust disappeared. Most of it was actually on the very top of the engine where the jake brakes are. It's good that we found it. As part of the fuel pump upgrade, we need to add in these twin fuel filters that go on the Cummins marine engines. So we're going to be building a bracket. Normally they sit directly above the starter motor down there. I don't want them above the starter motor because every time I change them I'm going to pour diesel all over it. So I'm thinking I'll make a bracket and stick them around the back here, and then we'll use basically that red hose you can see on the left hand side. We'll extend that out and use that to go around the corner and over to the fuel pump. Robin set about to designing a bracket that we need for these fuel filters to be mounted to the back end of the engine. Obviously using cardboard aided design, we'd come up with a decent plan, and then we'll be able to move that across onto some stainless and start cutting it out. Right, well this makes it slightly difficult to carry on grinding. There's a little bit of rain happening at the minute. Apparently electricity doesn't like this sort of weather.
Down in the engine bay at the moment. Guys aren't here, but I'm going to have a go at working on the Cummins myself. Shh, he's here.
This is the TIG welder's, what is it, the last TIG welder?
Oh, the last TIG welder. At the going down to the sun, we shall remember.
Yeah.
You being mentally traumatised, how are you feeling today about working on the Cummins?
Very mentally traumatised.
Do you want to get any closer to it? Have you had your vaccine?
Time to start assembling the motor. So we're giving it a vacuum so that we can get rid of any loose and flaky bits of paint and things like that came off the Tappet covers when we pulled them off. Next step will be to go through and clean any rust using some WD-40 and a toothbrush.
Adrian said to me, what do you want to do this morning? It's the weekend. I said, oh, why don't we polish Damien's Cummins with a toothbrush? And then we'll do his lawns with nail scissors.
Where it's due.
So what's the plan? Why are you taking these out?
So we can get in
clean up
and
along
clean the old
edge
gasket.
yeah, that's all.
Oh, well, that cleared it up.
Adrian's in the engine bay asking the big questions.
Where is Hamburglar from McDonald's? He's disappeared. There's still Ronald, but where's Hamburglar?
So if you're putting an engine together, you normally use something like this, engine assembly lube. So it's basically just a grease that helps you lubricate the engine until the engine can do it itself with the oil, so until it spins up. It's only there for the first sort of start up pretty much.
Don't go doing them up tight on the engine. Just hold it, just sort of nip it.
And then tighten it up in a vise where you can't side load the valves.
And if you try and tighten the adjuster on the motor,
You'll actually see the bow springs trying to flex around.
Yeah.
So you can actually see if you were to try and do that up, you're just going to hurt something. It's not good. You don't stick things in a hole sideways, so don't put sideways loads on your valves.
So basically what you're doing, we're having this is fixed, this is adjustable, and all you're doing is essentially making them identical.
Yes.
For the variation.
For the variation in the valves too.
Yes, and then you set this here is where you do your feeler gauge to get your heights.
Yes.
Right.
So
one thing I noticed, look at that, where that valve's touching, you've got, it's almost like
someone
a
hasn't
mushroom.
dressed the top there. That's where they've ground the valve and the centre, so it's smaller. So that's where it's been riding.
Yep.
Same thing there, it's just where it's been riding.
Alright. The valve grind doesn't feel right. It feels like the edge has been a bit sort of mushroomed, someone's cleaned it up with a file or something. It's not real beautiful, it's kind of...
We'll run a bit of emery cloth over the top of that.
Alright, sweet.
Flooding in the Burnett region due to the storm.
Wow. That's what we're trying to work in and recently paint the boat in.
Yeah.
So Stu found a bit of just scrap. You can tell it's scrap, just all the crap written on it. It happens in boatyards. So we're going to use that plate to block up the big hole in the front of the reservoir, the water reservoir. So that is blocking this up, and the reason we need to do that is so that we can fill it with water and just find out if we've got any leaks in the engine. We'll get some pressure in there and for when we run it up and everything. So Robin's up there organising some more ply to protect the side of the boat. Down here I've got the Cummins rocker boxes, so these are going to be reused. These basically control our valve. They go between our push rods and our valves, and they allow the valves and the injector to open at the right time. I want to give these a good clean up so that you can sort of see a bit of gunk and rubbish sort of on them, so I'm going to give them a good degrease and a clean up. If I can, I'd like to paint them, but I don't necessarily know if we're going to have time before we put them back on the engine.
I want you to stay true to what's right for you. No matter who or know what will others say. Just find your way and try to stay true.
here you can see Stu is starting to reinstall the push rods for the valves and injectors. Putting a bit of assembly lube on the wear surfaces. And refitting the rocker boxes.
A key part to removing jake brakes is changing these little bungs over. These have a central hole in them that feed oil up into the jake brakes, but they also act as a locator to stop the rocker shaft from spinning. So we're putting new pins in that don't have that hole so that we can maintain oil pressure to the current rocker shaft. Because we got rid of the jake brakes, we need about 2 inches less bolt to hold these rocker boxes on. So as part of the conversion, Carl, the Cummins guy, he gave us a whole bunch of rocker cover bolts that are, you know, the right size. They're basically non-jake brake bolts. They're about 2 inches shorter. However, they are second-hand, they're a bit rusty, so I'm going to go through and do a wire wheel clean-up of these, give them a buzz up so they're nice and razzed up, and we can put them back in without any sort of binding. One thing I noticed doing this job was it's much easier to use this bench grinder when it's not raining. This is what they start out like, and this is what they finish up like. This tool that I'm using is called a torque wrench. It allows you to tighten a bolt up to an exact tension. You can set the tension and then you'll hear a click click when you get there. Almost every bolt in an engine has a torque setting, and this is the tool you use to make sure you get the right setting.
A big thanks to John Limington for donating this Blue Point torque winch to Brupeg.
Damien's asked us to work on the cooling system for the Cummins. He's asked us to drain it, so we figured the best way to do that is just get a big mag drill and drill huge holes in it and drain it out that way. It's quick for us. May not be what he wants, but that happens.
For anyone who hasn't watched these old episodes, the keel cooling pipes will be coming off before we go to Antarctica.
I did the maths yesterday, and I think this cooling system, the pipes outside anyway, hold 82 litres, I think it is. Oh, coolant. That's alright, that's good.
Yeah, I think I'll be off for a pee in a minute, do I just
Yeah, well, that's good news, Damien. Green, not rust coloured. I notice he's even got monogrammed annular cutters, Damo. Actually, I might go and thicker and rivet that plate on the header tank.
Maybe do that, get that done.
While the old coolant was draining from the keel cooling pipes, Stu and Adrian organised the aluminium plate that blocks off the hole at the front of our new reservoir above the engine. At the same time, Robin and I were organising the stainless bracket needed for the dual fuel filter conversion. With the design sorted, I thought I'd tuck myself into the corner and have myself a little tiggle.
Done. Hurrah. We'll open a tin of prunes.
So you can see here, this I'd say is the where the coolant comes and enters the system. Damien dumped this coolant in quite recently, so coolant here in this one, but when we drain this side it's just pure water, so this is obviously the return side. Anyway, one more compartment here. If we do the bottom side of this manifold, we should get this run, and that should be everything.
With the bracket welded together, it was time to start fitting all of the parts, put a bit of assembly lube on the bolts, screw them all together, fit the filters, and then start fitting the fuel lines, whilst Adrian and Stu organised the water system.
You could have bought the non-squeak aluminium. That would have been better.
They're very pleased with themselves because they put a stupid Detroit sign at the front. So we just need to go and get our coolant system sorted, and the guys have drilled some drain holes in the cooling keel cooling pipes. So instead of like welding those back up, we're actually just going to drill and tap them, put an M8 bolt in it, and that way we've always got a drain circuit if we ever need to change coolant. This is an M8 bolt. If you're ever tapping an M8 hole, you just take the diameter minus the size of the thread pitch. So in this case it's M8 by 1.25, and that's your drill size. So we need a 6.75 drill size. I've got a 6.5 and that's my tap. We're good to go. Beauty of using spiral taps like that is you don't have to go, you know, forward back as you're tapping in. You can just one smooth forward motion the whole way through, because the swarf gets spiraled out like a drill. Socket's not quite right, I'll go find the right socket. Speed of This is the coolant that we're using. It's a concentrate, so it's 20 litre drum. We've got plenty here. So Adrian is gonna do the tune-up. So we're gonna start moving the engine around so that we can line the valves up in different places and we can start tuning those up with the right tappet clearance. Thermostat's located under here. I'm gonna take this out so that we can start filling up the coolant system. And then we're just about ready to start the engine, I think, once that's done.
So with all of us in the engine room, we were each working on different parts of the engine service. Adrian was fitting the alternator and then getting the engine in the right position so that we can set the tappets correctly for either tappets or injectors, depending on what we're working on at the time. I was working on the water system, making sure that we can get the new thermostat in and then eventually get some coolant into the engine. And Stu was locating the correct engine service procedure online so that we can make sure that we're setting everything to the correct numbers.
While wheels running, got a couple of bolts. We've cleaned them up, they're quite nice. These are the ones that we pulled out of the water system. So before we clean them, they look pretty scabby and then they come up really beautiful. So just giving them all a razz up like that. We also want to clean up this pipe that I just pulled off. So inside, it's not horrific, but it's pretty gross. So we're just going to give that a real good clean up. That's how everything comes up, nice and clean. Able to reseal everything. So new hose on this end, new O-ring on this end with a wee bit of rubber grease. So when we slide it in, we don't damage the O-ring.
This tool that Adrian's got in his hand here is called feeler gauges. These are what we use to set the tappets on an engine, whether it's petrol or diesel, it doesn't matter. Essentially each one of these is a varying thickness and you choose the one that you want and you slide it between the rocker arm and the top of the valve, or in this case the valve bridge, and it determines how well the motor runs. So when you do a tune up on a diesel, you're basically setting tappets like this so that you have the correct valve opening amount. As the engine gets warm, the valve clearance gets smaller and smaller, and that's what this clearance allows for. You set it when it's cold, and then it basically assumes when the engine's up to the right temperature, you'll have the correct settings.
11 and 23.
So
11 for the intake.
yeah, and 23 exhaust.
23 exhaust.
What's the injector? You not done that yet? Or?
They're 6 foot-pound,
Yeah.
6 inch-pounds,
Yeah.
or 0.7 of a unit metre,
Yeah.
or finger tight,
Yeah.
and then quarter of a turn.
Okay.
So what do these numbers mean specifically for our Cummins 855? We need 11 thou clearance for our intake valve, and we need 23 thou clearance for our exhaust valve. You always set the exhaust valve slightly bigger because the exhaust valve sees a lot more heat than the intake valve. So as that metal gets warm, it grows, and that 23 thou clearance allows for that.
Stu's cleaning up the housing for the water thermostat. It's pretty scabby. Most of that's actually come out of Stu's nose, but he's using the same rag to clean the water for some reason.
So it's time. The guys are filling the engine with 7.5 litres of the coolant concentrate.
Do you have one of those flat sharpening blocks, Damien?
No.
It's called the oil stain, Stu.
You know, I was just trying to dumb it down for him. He's a Kiwi.
Oh, that's right.
You know, it's like
You know the flat beach rock that you get that's in the 2 bits of wood?
That's exactly how it goes. Is it a Cummins noise? It's not putter.
Yeah. Oh no, it'll be clack, 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 clack. You already listened to the rocket cover.
Isn't that a VW?
Fucking rattling fucking shitbox tons of bills.
Is this still his Tinder profile again? Right, 7.5 litres of coolant. So making a gasket, 101. Put it on here and wait for Adrian to swear at you until you do it right.
Exactly. Get fucked up.
See? Right, good. Step 1. Step 2. Make the gasket.
Here's a hammer.
Alright.
What do you call a lump hammer in New Zealand?
Bommy knocker.
Bommy knocker.
Obviously.
Damien said that we have a strange word, lump hammer, and that bommy knocker is the technical term. Hello.
Better than mouth.
There we go. So that's
out.
pop that out, and there we go. Done.
Bit wire. Let's see how much smoke we can make.
What are you doing over this side?
Wasn't doing anything.
You can't prove anything.
He sounds like a guilty schoolboy.
Yeah.
It's quite nice. I can hear your voices. Coming back on board.
You
Yeah.
can hear our voices.
Disembodied voices.
You can hear swearing is all you can hear.
Oh no, really?
And obscene language. And abuse.
I don't mind a bit of obscene language, but is it because of the motor?
And you can hear Adrian.
No, it's alright.
Yeah.
It's all happening.
You scared me, Adrian.
No, it's only just abuse of each other.
Oh, that's fine.
This is where the thermostat housing goes. This is for water. It controls the engine temp. This is the housing here. My glamorous assistant is showing me his sanded hole. brand new little pinky. So that goes up in there, like up there like that. Bolts that sandwich together. I'll put a wee bit on here as well, so when we push it in, it sort of smears in. Yeah. This is the thermostat that's going in Brupeg, and it looks nothing like the sort that you'd have in your car. And the way that they work is they actually split down this joint here, and they slide back and forth and allow water to bypass them. So even though they have essentially a great big hole down the guts of them, they don't really have flow going down there. They have flow coming onto the side of them, and then this moving back and forth allows water to bypass and go through them. This is the wax portion that does the heat contracting or expanding. And then the seal is located in this housing. Stu's just putting it in now. And you can see the seal there, how it sits in the housing, and the thermostat sits down in that orientation. So we're just going slow like this. You can tell if you're getting the seal in straight. Just use a big socket that's the same size as the seal, and then just try and get down there.
We're home and hosed. So body bit in, and then the where's the old one? This part. So this part's gone down through that seal we just installed. So it forms a seal around the body of it. Oh, I admit it, you are better at Scrabble than me.
We weren't 100% confident that the O-ring on the bottom of this water pipe was up to the job, just out of my sort of O-ring kit, you know, where you have a selection of them. So we went into town this morning. Adrian and I went to the Cummins dealer and we grabbed a Cummins genuine part. It looked absolutely identical to the one that we took off, but at least we now know that we have the right one. So we're going to use a bit of rubber grease, smear it around the O-ring, and that allows us to push it in without you know, tearing the O-ring and crimping it up or doing anything funny. There is a little bracket that goes on this that holds it down, but I don't have that bracket. This motor never had it. So we're going to go and Adrian's going to talk to Carl, the Cummins guy in Brisbane. He is the Cummins version of Adrian. He is a genius when it comes to these motors. He's got a whole bunch of them there, and we're going to see if we can find some that just have one of these brackets that we can rob. We also got some silicone pipe, and we're going to use that on all of our fittings. So now that we've got that, we can put this all together, start filling up the water system and check for leaks. It's not gonna fit easy. I wonder if we need to crack that off. Let's crack that off. So Adrian's going through and cleaning out the alloy threads on all of the, for the tappet covers to go on. On the back of our keel cooling pipes, there's two air drains right at the very back end of the engine room. They weld from the keel cooling all the way out through the engine room. There's a bung. So I'm watching those to find out when the water I'm putting in here starts coming out the end, because that's when I know the keel cooling is full. Hey, there we go.
Serious?
Down the back. Can you just lower one full?
Well, yeah, these like
Back. Get the back one going.
that.
Tappet cover gaskets. They're a plastic gasket with like a rubbery sort of blue insert. Silicone gasket, sorry. You don't need any goo being silicone, it just compresses.
Compresses nicely.
Yeah.
Put it on the right way though, same as the other one.
Yes, thank you.
Make it aesthetically pleasing.
Yep. That looks spotty. How do we know we've got half a tank?
Drill a hole halfway. Put a cyclast in the front.
Yeah, that would have worked. Or spray some transparent out. Hey, woo! I got too much stuff happening at once.
So folks, we have a pinhole, and that clamp is just a marginally too big. It's just there somewhere. There.
We found some pinholes, so we gave it an absolute world of weld on top of that to try and nuke first off the pinhole that we found, but also 2 or 3 that we found sort of beside that weren't quite leaking yet, hoping we've stopped that.
Where's that come from?
We found we were losing coolant into the bilge. We did a bit of hunting and we tracked down it was one of the pipes connecting the keel cooling to the engine that was a bit loose. We did a bit of ninja work. I got the coolant lines hooked up, the pipes and the various fittings tightened up. Adrian got the alternator on, the belts tightened up, then started working on the batteries, all so that we could start the motor.
At this stage, we're just bleeding the air from the fuel injectors.
Probably even the fuel in the pump, have we?
No, but it'll pull it through. Good. And we would have drained all the injectors out.
Of course, this is common rail, so it doesn't even need bleeding injectors, does it?
Yeah, they're all on, aren't they? That's on, isn't it?
Yep.
That's on, that side's on.
Yep, they're on.
Is that our tap over there on?
Yep.
Yep.
Switch. Whenever you muck around with a fuel supply on a diesel engine, it's always a bit of a job getting them started next up. With a small diesel you can bleed the injectors. With a large diesel like this that has something that has unit injectors, you can't bleed them, you just have to basically wind out the air bubbles. In this case, we thought that we had everything hooked up correctly. We were wrong. And now for something completely different.
This is Robin's ride home. Damien just gave him a hand to do some safety checks before he headed out.
Thank you. The pilot surveys the hold against the...
Oh look, this one's got an engine.
You can just put in the pilot seat. That one's good.
It was great fun having Robin up, really enjoyed his company, and absolutely thank you so much for all of the help on Brupeg.
It's a wee ripper. Drag race. Oh, he's up. He's up. Yay!
Run out of juice.
Yeah, I know.
Not making pressure.
We didn't know it at the time, but we had these 2 pipes around the wrong way. The issue was every time we were winding the engine, the fuel pump was definitely sucking fuel, but it was sucking it out of the engine and trying to put it into the tank. 100% the opposite direction of what we really needed. So once we swapped them around, this is what happened. Sweet. Let's put it back together.
Well, that started nice and easy once we got the oil and the fuel through the various galleries. Let me show you why I'm starting it with the engine tappet covers open. So it's all about the conversion that we've just done with our exhaust brakes coming off. This plug here is the oil gallery supply for the exhaust brake. So previously it had a hole inside that Allen key bolt. It would come up and it would, you know, fill the oil gallery for the exhaust brakes. With those gone, we need to essentially block this gallery off, which is what we've done with this plug here. Same on every other head. But the check that I wanted to see is, you can see there's oil coming out in the gap here and the gap here between the 3 rocker arms. It basically and it's the same on the cylinder here, same on every other cylinder in the motor, no doubt. But basically what it does is it tells me that I've got this oil gallery working properly. I didn't have any doubt, because I mean, either this bung is in or it's out, and if you have it out, you're going to have oil flying up the top, and this cylinder isn't going to fire, and lots and lots of, you know, telltale signs. But just one of those things, I'd rather be absolutely certain. And the other side of it is being able to see inside the engine like this just makes sure that I can just have a final check before we close it up to make sure I'm happy with everything that's going on. I was going to do this service on the engine after we launched. It was great to have Adrian here to go through all of the bits and pieces that needed to be done. But yeah, pretty much it was like riding a bike. As soon as we opened the lid, all of it started to flow back. So yeah, it was awesome to have the guys here. It was awesome to get the motor tuned up prior to launch. Nice to know that we can just jump in the water, start the motor and be good to go. Now that we've got the new fuel pump fitted, a job that I do need to do is get this accelerator lever hooked up to our Morse cables. Originally the truck uses this little bracket down here. It's not used in the marine pump. We're using this one up the top here. Different governor, different location, different arrangement. So previously the lever used to go up and down in that orientation. We may be able to change this, modify it to go in the horizontal orientation. We'll just have to see. My bracket is located somewhere. Oh, there it is, jammed up on the roof up there. So we just have to basically fit that back up, modify it and get this little bracket here working again. Couple of checks when we wind the motor over. I've got a manual oil gauge, just an analog oil gauge screwed straight into one of the oil galleries, and it's on the starting side. So as I'm starting the engine, I can see that oil pressure come up. So I always know we've got oil pressure pretty much. It only takes 1 or 2 rotations for this engine to get oil pressure. It's obviously not a huge amount of clearance in the oil pump, which is nice. We are going to be getting rid of some of these old original fittings and putting in new fittings. We've got the gauges and everything upstairs, we just haven't fitted them. But as part of our engine monitoring suite, one of our supporters, Duncan, has been building this thing, and it's amazing. What it does is tracks a lot of engine data over time, so we can look at things like oil pressure, exhaust gas temp, water temp before and after the cooler, gearbox oil pressure, fuel pressure in, fuel pressure out, which allows us to work out the differential and therefore how full the fuel filters are. I'm also going to be doing a fuel temp because that allows me to know when I can switch over from diesel to veg oil. So there's quite a few things, and basically it's all logged digitally using an NMEA 2000 network. It's a pretty amazing little system. There's going to be a lot more detail coming up on that soon, but that's something that this engine is being built for. So normally these engines have next to no electronics on them whatsoever. We're not turning it into an electronically controlled engine, but we are turning it into an electronically monitored engine. The beauty of that is it gives us a lot of long-term data, so we can start saying, okay, you know, the oil pressure's been sitting at 65 whenever at cruise speed, it sits at 65 psi, and then it started to drop off over time, so we know something's going on in the engine, like wears happening or something like that. Not normal to be able to see that sort of level of information on one of these old motors. Normally it's a, you know, an operator that uses it day in, day out, that looks at the oil gauge and goes, hey, that looks a bit low. That's pretty subjective. This is going to give us something that's black and white data.
Hi guys, thanks for all your help.
Thanks Robin, Stu and Adrian. It's been bloody awesome having you guys up here. Robin, you animated the boat for the 10 days you were here, singing ditties and sea shanties.
It worked so hard.
Oh God, you worked hard, yeah. And Adrian, having you here checking over our work and sort of helping us set things up, it was just bloody awesome to have a second set of eyes run over everything.
Adrian, thank you so much for your expertise and your generosity and your vivaciousness. Can I call it that? I think that's probably the safest word to call it.
Swearing's vivacious.
I loved it, thank you.
And Stu, mate, having you here is always awesome.
Yeah.
It's great seeing you again coming up onto the boat. Look forward to when you're up here again next time.
Good luck guys with your projects and what's coming next. It's pretty exciting.
And all the best for taking Renko down the coast, Stu.
Yeah,